The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of crystalline space. Ambassador Christopher Hayes walked forward with his team, their footsteps echoing against floors that glowed with bioluminescent patterns. The air itself felt heavy with the weight of 1,000 years of galactic politics. All around them, species from across the known universe had gathered. Tall beings with tentacles moved through the air. Creatures made of pure energy floated in containment fields. The reptilians sat in clusters, their scaled bodies catching the light, and everywhere there were eyes, watching, judging. Christopher knew he looked small to them. Humans always did. His frame was narrow compared to the towering traders who stood twice his height. His skin lacked the metallic sheen of the. He could not change color like the or communicate through bioluminescence like the. But he carried himself straight, and his delegation of 50 humans followed him with purpose. The human section of the observation deck had been placed in the back corner, far from the central speaking platform. Christopher noted this small insult and filed it away. He had learned to notice these things, small dismissals, tiny acts of disrespect. They told you everything about what other species truly thought of you. The stood from his elevated seat. His voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by neural resonators that made the very walls vibrate. "The new species from the outer rim has arrived," he announced. "We shall hear their petition to join our community." Christopher moved forward. The presentation had been prepared for weeks. Hundreds of humans across Earth had contributed research, data, and proposals. Scientists had compiled information about Earth's resources. Engineers had documented human technological achievements. Politicians had crafted speeches about cooperation and mutual benefit. Everything was designed to prove that humanity deserved a seat at this table, that Earth had something valuable to offer. He began to speak about Earth's history of overcoming obstacles. He showed data about human population density and resource management. He presented information about human manufacturing capabilities. He described the unified governments that now controlled Earth, the end of wars that had once divided the planet. He spoke for 30 minutes, and the chamber remained silent. When Christopher finished his initial presentation, he stepped back and waited. The first responses came from the delegation. They were beings of pure crystalline structure, their bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. Their leader, council member, leaned forward with what might have been interest. "Primitive," she said simply. "Your technology is 3 centuries behind what any established species possesses. Your ships cannot navigate beyond the local cluster. Your energy systems are wasteful. Your communication devices are crude and unreliable." "But they are our own achievement," Christopher began to respond. Continued speaking, ignoring him. "Earth could serve as a colony world that would be willing to govern it for the next 100 years. Your species could contribute labor for mining operations. You could produce agricultural products. In time, with proper guidance, perhaps some of your kind might develop useful skills." Laughter erupted from several sections of the chamber. They slapped their scaled legs in amusement. Even the usually silent emitted clicking sounds that translated as mocking commentary. Christopher's jaw clenched, but he kept his face neutral. This was not unexpected. The intelligence reports had warned him that some species would be hostile, that some would see humanity as competition rather than partners. A representative stood next. His name was roughly translated as, and he was a military commander from what remained the largest military power in the galaxy. "The humans have aggression in their genetic coding," announced. "They have a history of violence. They wage wars against their own species. This is unstable. This is dangerous. I propose we accept Earth into the community, but with strict military restrictions. No weapons beyond defensive systems. No military research permitted. No independent fleet development allowed." Christopher tried to respond again. "Earth has established peaceful governance. We have overcome our violent history." But was already sitting down, and another species had stood to speak. This one was a Quinn, a being of liquid consciousness held within a transparent membrane. Its voice sounded like water flowing through canyons. "The suggestion of colonial status is reasonable," the Quinn said. "Humans are young, they lack the wisdom of older species. Perhaps they are not ready for true independence. Perhaps they should begin as subjects under older protectorates." The chamber erupted again. More voices joined in. A diplomat spoke about humanity's short, suggesting that species who lived for only 80 years could not be trusted with important decisions. An engineer called human emotional responses a liability in a logical galactic community. A scientist announced that human brains lacked the capacity for certain forms of advanced mathematics. Christopher stood silent through it all. His team stood behind him, their expressions hardening. He could see the anger building in their faces. He could feel the weight of every insult, every dismissal, every moment of contempt. The finally called for a vote on Earth's status. The question was simple. Should humanity be accepted into the galactic community, and under what terms? The result was unanimous. Humanity was accepted. But the restrictions were devastating. Earth would have no access to military-grade technology. No independent trade routes would be granted without approval from a governing committee. All human expansion beyond Earth's solar system required authorization from an oversight board comprised entirely of established species. Earth's voting power in the Council was set at 1/10 that of any other member species. New technology could only be used after review and approval by the Technological Standards Council. The treaty was written and presented. Christopher read through the terms as the chamber watched. Each word felt like a chain being wrapped around human ambitions. Each clause stripped away autonomy. Each paragraph reinforced the message that humanity was not equal. Humanity was not worthy. Humanity was something to be controlled and guided like a child. Christopher signed the treaty. He had no choice. The alternative was being rejected entirely, thrown back to Earth as a failure. At least this way, humanity was in the door. At least this way, humans could walk among the stars. But as he wrote his name on the digital signature, Christopher made a decision. He would record everything, every laugh, every insult, every moment of contempt. He would send it all back to Earth, and Earth would know exactly what the galaxy truly thought of humanity. Earth would know that these older species believed they could dictate, dominate, and diminish. And then, Christopher thought quietly to himself, they would see what humans could really do. He looked directly into the viewing lens as he sent his encrypted message back to the Joint Defense Council in Geneva. They've made their choice. Start the contingency protocols. Deep beneath the city of Geneva, in a bunker that had been reinforced with technologies Earth had developed on its own, General watched the video feed from the Galactic Council. Her face was stone as she listened to the describe humanity as primitive. Her hands clenched as the called humans dangerous. And when the voting results came through, she nodded once, slowly, as if confirming something she had always known. Around her in the operations center called the Keep, thousands of humans worked at stations and terminals. These were scientists, engineers, soldiers, and planners. They had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. They had known the Council would not treat humanity as equals. They had known the galaxy would try to keep humanity small and dependent. Stood from her command chair and walked to the main display wall. On it, a map of the galaxy spread across the projection. Thousands of red dots marked human infiltration points, trade stations, mining operations, manufacturing facilities, labor roles across 17 different species territories. Every single red dot represented a human who had traveled to the wider galaxy under the pretense of joining the community. Every single human was a spy, a saboteur, an engineer, a technician. Start Phase 2, said quietly. Across the galaxy, humans who had been living carefully, quietly, for months suddenly became more active. Captain Reeves, commanding a mining operation on a controlled asteroid, began training his team on the equipment they would need. Doctor, working as a technician in the communication hub, started analyzing the code that ran galactic networks. 30 human engineers working on a military base began taking precise measurements of defense systems. These humans had the advantage of invisibility. The galaxy had accepted them as inferior. They had not seemed threatening. They had worked hard, asked few questions, and proven themselves useful. The older species had barely paid attention to them. There had been no reason to. Humans were simple. Humans were primitive. Humans could be handled. But humanity had been planning something different. Back on Earth, in cities across every continent, humans worked frantically. In Tokyo, a team of programmers created encryption codes so advanced that even they would struggle to break them. Engineers designed systems that could disable galactic tech from a distance. In Lagos, scientists developed countermeasures against every known alien military technology. In New York, strategists compiled information about every weakness in galactic infrastructure that humans had discovered. The key insight was simple. The galaxy had rejected military equality with humanity. So humanity would not approach this as a military problem. Instead, humanity would approach it as an integration problem. Captain Grant commanded a human merchant vessel that operated under a trade license granted reluctantly by the... His ship carried minerals from Earth to various trading stations. He was hauling cargo that they had requested, a load of specialized metals that could only be properly processed on Earth. Everything was legitimate. Everything was authorized. When a military inspection team boarded his ship, knew what would happen. They would find nothing illegal. His manifests would be perfect. His permits would all be in order, but they would harass him anyway. They would demand payment for inspection fees. They would confiscate some cargo as a tax. This was how the treated species they did not respect. Stood at attention on his bridge as the commander, a large-scaled being named, stomped across the deck. Looked at the human with open contempt. "Your cargo transport violates Section 12 of the Expanded Trade Regulations," announced, citing a law that had been amended 3 times in the last week. Amendments that humans had only learned about through underground networks. "I was not informed of those amendments," said carefully. "Then your ignorance is your problem," said. He gestured to his soldiers. "Confiscate 40% of the cargo. This is now property of the collective." Did not fight. He did not argue. He simply smiled and activated a small camera hidden in his uniform button. The interaction was recorded in high quality. The date and time were logged. The name and badge number were captured clearly. Within hours, the video was transmitted through human networks spread across a dozen planets. It was posted on independent galactic forums. It was shared in human communities. The message was simple. This is how the established species treat us. Similar incidents began happening across the galaxy. A human merchant was accessed to a trade station based on a regulation that did not actually exist. A human scientist working in a laboratory was barred from accessing research materials despite having proper clearance. A human maintenance worker was forced to take a salary reduction without explanation or cause. Each incident was recorded. Each was documented. Each was shared. General watched all of this unfold from the keep. Her teams compiled the data. Lawyers drafted formal complaints. Researchers built a case documenting systematic abuse of human workers throughout galactic space. But that was not the main plan. The main plan involved the technology. Doctor had spent 4 months working in the communication hub, learning how the galactic networks functioned. The systems were impressive, but they had been built separately by different species over centuries. They had never been truly integrated. They had attempted to create a unified communication system, but they had realized they needed expertise they did not possess. The human solution was elegant. It was efficient. It was so clearly superior to what already existed that they had accepted it immediately. And once they had accepted human-designed technology, other species had too. Now, hidden in that technology, in hundreds of different locations across the galaxy, human code lay dormant, waiting. Doctor sent a message through secure channels to the keep. "The network is ready," he wrote. "All systems have the codes integrated. We can shut down everything simultaneously on your command." Read the message 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. The human race had not only infiltrated galactic space, they had not only documented abuse, they had actually made themselves indispensable. Human technology now ran the backbone of galactic civilization itself. She looked at the map of red dots representing humans spread across the galaxy. 50,000 humans placed strategically in critical positions. 10,000 in military facilities. 20,000 in communication centers. 8,000 in trade operations. 12,000 in research and development. Picked up her secure communications device and called Ambassador Christopher Hayes directly. "How did the vote go?" she asked. "Unanimously against us," Christopher replied from his position in the Galactic Council chamber. "They've restricted us in every way possible. We cannot move without their permission." "Good," said. "Begin the implementation. It is time for humanity to show the galaxy what underestimating us actually costs." In that moment, across thousands of light years, the mechanisms were set in motion. Humans began their work, not with weapons or force, but with access codes and technical expertise. They had been accepted into the galactic community on humiliating terms. Now they would show the galaxy exactly why accepting humanity as inferior had been the greatest mistake the established species had ever made. 63 days after humanity officially joined the galactic community, the first failure occurred at Trade Station Gamma 7. The station served as a hub connecting the territories of 5 different species. Thousands of transactions happened every hour. Ships docked, cargo was transferred, and commerce flowed like blood through the veins of galactic civilization. At exactly 900 hours station time, all the systems went dark. The power grid stuttered and failed. The communication arrays went silent. The docking mechanisms froze with ships suspended mid-approach. The environmental systems that kept the station from exposure to hard vacuum hesitated for just a moment before backup systems engaged. For 30 seconds, the entire station held its breath. Then the power returned, the systems rebooted, and everything seemed fine. Except the data records were corrupted, the transaction logs had scattered, the navigation systems needed, the communication relays had to be manually reset, and the whole thing would take hours to fully restore. The station commander, unnamed, stood in the control center and demanded an explanation. His engineers had no answer. The systems had simply failed. There was no warning. There was no reason. It had simply happened. Within 12 hours, 3 other trade stations experienced identical failures. Then 5 communication relays went dark simultaneously. Then the research facility near the galactic core reported that their quantum encryption system was producing errors in every output. The galactic community began to panic. The called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Species delegates gathered, their voices overlapping with accusations and demands for answers. The blamed the for deliberately sabotaging systems to steal trade advantages. The accused the of trying to monopolize advanced technology. The Quinn suggested that the failures were simply natural degradation of older systems and meant nothing. But the failures did not stop. They accelerated. A military base near the outer rim reported that their weapons targeting systems had gone offline. The missiles could still launch, but the guidance systems could not lock onto targets. They demanded that the fix it immediately. The shipping fleet reported that their navigation systems were unreliable. Ships that should have arrived in 2 weeks were suddenly calculating journeys that would take 3 months. They accused everyone of deliberately their equipment. They reported that their bioluminescent communication arrays were failing to transmit complex data. The crystalline structure of their systems seemed to be degrading at an accelerated rate, though no physical damage was evident. Across the galaxy, the infrastructure that had been built over thousands of years was proving fragile. Systems that had been designed independently by different species were now interconnected in ways that no one fully understood. When one piece failed, it created cascading problems throughout the network. The council member convened a technical emergency session. Engineers from multiple species gathered to investigate what was happening. They traced the failures back through the network, looking for a common cause. What they found shocked them. The human-designed systems that had been integrated to improve efficiency were present in every failure point. Human technology, human code, human engineering solutions that had been adopted galaxy-wide because they simply worked better than what the established species had created. And now something in that code was causing cascading failures. Personally oversaw a technical analysis of the human-designed encryption system. What her engineers discovered made her crystalline structure dim slightly, a sign of deep distress among her kind. The code was not random. The failures were not accidental. The patterns showed deliberate placement of mechanisms that could be triggered remotely. The humans have sabotaged the entire infrastructure, an engineer reported. They have designed into every major system. They have made us dependent on their technology, and now they have shown us they can disable anything they wish whenever they choose. The council chamber fell into stunned silence. Ambassador Christopher Hayes stood at the human observation desk. He was waiting for this moment. He had prepared for it, and now he moved forward to make humanity's position clear. The Galactic Council will suspend all military actions against any human vessels, Christopher said, his voice carrying through the chamber. Earth will receive full technological access equivalent to any established species. All restrictions on human expansion will be removed immediately. All compensation for the exploitation of human workers will be paid within 30 days. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You have 72 hours to agree to these terms. If you refuse, we will deactivate the infrastructure codes remotely. Every trade station will go dark. Every communication relay will go silent. Every military system will fail. The cities that run on human-designed thermal regulation will freeze. The fleet navigation systems will become useless. The weapons systems will not function. The power grids that keep most of you alive will fail. One of the representatives stood. This is an act of war. This is terrorism. You cannot demand these things under threat of destruction. We can and we do, Christopher replied calmly. You had the opportunity to treat us as equals. You chose to treat us as inferior. You chose to restrict us, to mock us, and to assume we would always be dependent on your benevolence. You were wrong. We have shown you that we are not dependent on you. You are dependent on us. The slammed his fist against his chair. The human species is unstable and dangerous. I told you this from the beginning. They will bring destruction upon us all. What brings destruction upon you is underestimation, Christopher said. What brings suffering upon you is contempt. You rejected us, and now you are learning the consequences of that choice. The chamber erupted into chaos. Species delegates shouted at each other. Military commanders demanded authorization to deploy forces. Scientists called for immediate investigation into what had happened. But underneath all of it, there was a simple, terrible realization. The humans had won, not through weapons, not through conquest, but through patience, planning, and the simple act of being underestimated. The older species had accepted humanity into their civilization without truly respecting them. They had allowed humans to work in their most critical systems, and now those systems belonged to humanity. Doctor, working from a secure location on a human-controlled asteroid, monitored the situation. He received the message from Christopher confirming that the ultimatum had been delivered. Sent a simple response. Waiting for your order. The codes are ready. I can shut everything down in 90 seconds if you give the word. Christopher looked at the chamber full of panicked aliens. He thought about the council votes. He thought about the humiliation. He thought about the restrictions and the dismissals and the contempt. He thought about all the humans who had been willing to work for lower pay in dangerous conditions, knowing that their sacrifice would eventually lead to this moment. Then he made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Do not shut down the systems yet, Christopher transmitted to the keep. Let them suffer for a little while longer. Let them understand the depth of their mistake. Then we will give them the choice to make things right. The 72 hours that followed were the longest and most painful in recent galactic history. The failures continued, not catastrophically but persistently. Trade stations operated at 30% capacity. Communication between distant territories took hours instead of minutes. Military forces could not effectively coordinate. The infrastructure that had been taken for granted for thousands of years was now unreliable. Species across the galaxy began to understand what it meant to be vulnerable. Those who had prided themselves on their technological mastery discovered that their advanced cities were failing because they depended on human-designed power systems. Those who had built their commercial empire on efficient trade networks found that their roots were breaking down. Those who had maintained military supremacy through superior weapons systems learned that their targeting algorithms would not function without the code that humans had written. The called for military action. We will seize the human technology and reprogram it ourselves, he announced to the council. But when military forces attempted to seize human vessels leaving a spaceport, they discovered something unexpected. The humans simply shut down the docking mechanisms remotely. The ships could not dock or undock. The station authority could not override the systems. For 6 hours, several warships were held hostage by their own docking platform. They attempted a different approach. They brought in their finest engineers and demanded that humans working on their military bases explain the technology that was failing. One human engineer, a woman named Porter, stood calmly in front of military officials and explained the situation clearly. The code is designed to be elegant, said. It is efficient because it is built on principles that your engineers did not understand. You can redesign it, but it will take years. You can reprogram it, but you will lose the efficiency that made it work in the first place. Or you can accept the humans' terms and keep everything functioning properly. The commander listened to this and realized that was telling the truth. They could not fix this problem, only humanity could. In the research facility near the galactic core, council member gathered her engineers. She had them analyze the human code line by line, looking for any weakness, any way to break free from dependency. What they discovered was shocking. The code was beautiful. It was precisely engineered. It solved problems in ways that they had never conceived of. The humans had not just created functional systems. They had created systems that were mathematically elegant and practically superior to everything they had built. Understood then that humanity had never been primitive. Humanity had simply been developing in isolation. The humans had taken their own paths to knowledge, and those paths had led them to solutions that the older species, bound by tradition and convention, had never discovered. Made a decision that shocked many of her people. She stood in the delegation chamber and announced, "We must accept the human ultimatum. It is the only logical choice." A younger challenged her. "But this means we accept inferiority. This means we bow to a younger species." "No," said firmly. "This means we recognize that knowledge and capability are not determined by age. The humans have shown themselves to be our equals, perhaps even our superiors in some areas. To refuse to acknowledge this is not pride, it is blindness." The first species to formally accept Earth's terms was the. Then came the, who realized that their biological systems could not function without human-designed medical technology. Then came the, who had secretly been dependent on human industrial processes that they had not even recognized. The resisted longest, the called for a vote among the delegation on whether to accept Earth's ultimatum. The debate lasted for 16 hours. Old traditions clashed with practical necessity. Pride fought against survival. In the end, the leadership realized that they had no choice. They voted to accept. They were the last. A military council debated whether humanity's demands were even legal under galactic law. But the law had been written by the very species who were now dependent on human technology. And the law stated that no species could be held in permanent subjugation or deprivation of their basic rights. The representative finally stood in the council chamber and announced their acceptance of Earth's ultimatum. The vote was called. All 47 species of the Galactic Council voted unanimously to rescind all restrictions on Earth. All species agreed to provide compensation for the exploitation of human workers. All species consented to grant humanity full and equal status in the galactic community. But before the vote was officially recorded, an older named stood and requested permission to address the council. He was ancient by standards, having been alive for more than 4,000 years. His crystalline structure was partially dim by the weight of long experience. "I have seen many species come to this council seeking recognition," said slowly. "I have watched empires rise and others fall. I have observed countless conflicts and countless reconciliations, but I have never witnessed what I have just witnessed." He paused, looking directly at Christopher Hayes. "Humanity did not conquer us through weapons. They conquered us through patience and brilliance and the willingness to work beneath their true capabilities. They accepted our contempt. They accepted our restrictions. They accepted our dismissals. And all the while they were learning. They were integrating. They were becoming essential." Moved forward slightly. "The irony is profound and terrible. We rejected these humans because we thought they were primitive. We kept them restricted because we believed they were dangerous. And in doing so, we created exactly the conditions that made them dangerous. We gave them the opportunity to prove themselves while thinking we were giving them nothing. We were always foolish. We simply did not realize how foolish until it was too late." Turned to face the rest of the council. "Humanity's greatest strength is not their weapons or their technology. It is their capacity to remember, to unite, and to execute a plan with perfect discipline. These are the qualities that allowed them to survive on a hostile world that killed most species who attempted to colonize it. These are the qualities that allowed them to overcome their own violent nature and build planetary unity. And these are the qualities that allowed them to walk among us with humility, while gathering the power to reshape the entire galactic order." Christopher Hayes listened to this and felt the weight of what had been accomplished. They had been forced to accept. They had been compelled to negotiate. They had been shown the limits of their understanding. But's words revealed something different. Had understood what had happened, and more importantly, he understood what it meant. Dr. Sarah, Earth's lead negotiator, stood beside Christopher. She leaned close and whispered, "What now?" Christopher thought about the billions of humans on Earth. He thought about the 50,000 humans scattered across the galaxy. He thought about the future that was now possible. And he made a statement that would be recorded in galactic history. "I am grateful for the Council's decision to recognize humanity as equals," Christopher said. But I want the record to show something important. Humanity does not claim to be superior. We claim only to be equal. We do not seek to dominate the galaxy the way it attempted to dominate us. We seek only recognition and respect." He paused, "And I want the Council to understand this. We have proven that we could hold your entire civilization hostage. We could shut down your systems. We could force you to obey. But we will not, because that is not who we are. We could have become like the species that tried to diminish us. Instead, we will choose to be better." Christopher looked at each council member in turn. "Humanity will honor the agreement that was just signed. We will restore full functionality to all infrastructure. We will not retain hidden codes or secret. We will integrate fully and fairly with the galactic community. Because proving ourselves through dominance is not as valuable as proving ourselves through integrity." The council chamber filled with silence. Then slowly, one by one, the species representatives began to acknowledge what Christopher had said. And in that moment, Earth's place in the galaxy was truly secured. Not because humans had forced their way to acceptance, but because they had chosen to earn it through honor. 3 months after Earth's acceptance as an equal in the galactic community, the infrastructure codes were fully returned to the galactic authorities. Not copies, not backup versions. The complete original codes with all the mechanisms removed and replaced with standard encryption. Humanity could have kept leverage. They chose not to. General stood before the United Earth Council in the underground chamber in Geneva. Around her sat representatives from every human government, every major scientific institution, and every military command center. The chamber was packed with the most powerful humans on the planet, and they were waiting to hear from the woman who had orchestrated the greatest strategic victory in human history. "The contingency protocols are being dismantled," announced. "All human agents embedded in galactic systems are being recalled. All intelligence operations are being suspended. All covert activities are being shut down. From this moment forward, Earth will operate with complete transparency in the galactic community." A representative from the Asian Council stood. "General, are you certain this is wise? We hold the galaxy hostage by our knowledge. Why would we willingly give that up?" Looked at the representative directly. "Because we are not the same species that those older beings thought we were. They believed we would become what they are given enough power. They believed we would dominate and control, but they were wrong about human nature. Humans, when united and when treated with respect, do not seek permanent dominance. We seek partnership." She pointed to the display showing the human settlements now being established throughout the galaxy. "There are 43 new human colonies being established on worlds previously closed to us. 50 human researchers are working alongside engineers on projects that neither species could accomplish alone. Human military officers are training alongside warriors. These are not relationships built on fear. They are relationships built on mutual respect." Step down from the speaking platform. The humans who traveled to the galaxy as infiltrators, as saboteurs, as planners of contingency are now becoming what they always should have been. They are becoming teachers. They are becoming partners. They are becoming what Earth always hoped to contribute to the wider galactic community. On a newly opened human colony world, Captain Reeves stood on a plain of red sand beneath a sky filled with 2 suns. His team was setting up the first permanent settlement. They had equipment, supplies, and plans for 1,000 years of expansion. But standing beside him was a named, the ancient crystalline being who had spoken in the council chamber. Was studying the geological samples that team had collected. His crystalline structure glowed with intense interest as he analyzed the data. "This mineral composition is remarkable," said. "It could be used to create energy systems of unprecedented efficiency, but your team is not trying to extract it. Why?" Smiled. "We could extract it. We could make ourselves wealthy. But this world was closed to us for thousands of years. It deserves to remain mostly unchanged. We will establish our settlements carefully. We will mine only what we need. And we will partner with other species to develop the resources together rather than exploit them alone." Made a sound that was equivalent to laughter. "You humans are strange. You could dominate and you choose partnership. You could hoard and you choose to share. This is the exact opposite of what I would expect from a species that just seized control of the entire galactic infrastructure." "That was not our goal," said. "Our goal was to be recognized as equals. That is all we wanted. Now that we have achieved that, our focus is different. It is not about power anymore. It is about building something that lasts, something that is built on foundation of mutual respect rather than fear." Back in the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Christopher Hayes sat as a full voting member. The chamber had changed since the first time humanity entered it. The human observation section had been expanded and elevated. The human delegation now had equal voice in all discussions. And more importantly, the older species had stopped looking at human representatives with contempt. The council was debating a new initiative. There was a threat emerging in the far reaches of galactic space, something that the older species could not fully identify or understand. They needed a task force to investigate. They needed explorers, strategists, and warriors who could think in new ways. The of the stood and made a proposal. I suggest we create a joint task force with human participation. The humans have demonstrated abilities that our species lack. Perhaps they can help us understand this threat. Christopher listened to the debate that followed. The agreed. The and the Quinn and dozens of other species all agreed. For the first time, Earth was being asked to contribute not because they had been forced to, but because the galaxy genuinely believed humanity had something valuable to offer. Christopher stood to accept the proposal, but before he could speak, council member stood. I want to make an official statement for the record, said. Humanity's integration into the galactic community has proven far more beneficial than any of us anticipated. Human innovation, human determination, and human capacity for cooperation have enhanced every area in which they participate. I propose that we examine all our prior restrictions on species development and reconsider whether our traditional models of hierarchical status are actually beneficial to galactic civilization. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. They had just called into question the entire system that had maintained older species dominance for. That evening, after the council session had ended, Christopher received a private message from. The Ancient requested a meeting in a small chamber overlooking the galactic expanse. Christopher arrived to find standing motionless, his crystalline form refracting the light of distant stars. I have been alive for 4,000 years, said without preamble. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have watched species evolve and stagnate. And I have learned one fundamental truth that your kind seem to understand without ever being taught. Christopher waited, listening. Strength without honor is merely brutality, continued. But honor without strength is simply weakness. Humanity possessed neither strength nor honor when you arrived at the council. Or rather, you possessed both, but the strength was hidden and the honor was invisible to those who despised you. But you allowed yourself to be diminished. You accepted the restrictions. You accepted the mockery. And you did this not because you were weak, but because you understood something that older species have forgotten. Turn to face Christopher directly. Sometimes the greatest victory is not won by conquest, but by proving yourself worthy of the position you seek. Sometimes the greatest power is not held by those who dominate, but by those who choose restraint. Earth will change the galaxy, not because you have forced change upon it, but because your existence challenges everything we thought we understood about power, capability, and what it truly means to be worthy of respect. Christopher listened and understood that they was saying something profound. Humanity's strength had never been about weapons or technology. It had been about unity, about patience, about the capacity to work together toward a common goal without needing immediate recognition or reward. Back on Earth, in cities across every continent, humans celebrated. They had not conquered the galaxy. They had not dominated it, but they had earned their place in it. And more importantly, they had done it while remaining true to the principles that had always defined the best of humanity. They had shown compassion alongside strength. They had demonstrated restraint alongside capability. Christopher stood at the viewport of the council chamber and looked out at the vast expanse of galactic space. Somewhere out there, thousands of humans were building new settlements, contributing to new projects, and proving every day that Earth belonged among the stars. And somewhere on a ship traveling through deep space, Captain Reeves received a message from the council. The joint task force investigating the mysterious threat needed a human commander. They wanted Reeves to lead them. They wanted his creativity, his instinct, and his willingness to think in ways that other species had never considered. Looked at the message and smiled. This was what humanity had always been meant to do. Not to serve, not to dominate, but to contribute, to build, to explore, to stand beside other species as equals and create something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone. He accepted the position and sent his response. I am honored to lead this mission. Earth is ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy presents. And in that moment, across thousands of worlds and between dozens of species, the true age of galactic civilization began. Not the age of human dominance, not the age of restored older species control, but the age of genuine partnership, where all species finally understood that the greatest achievements are not won through force, but earned through integrity, demonstrated through excellence, and shared with those willing to recognize worth when they see it. Earth had not burned every agreement overnight through violence or conquest. Earth had transformed the galactic order by simply proving that humanity was worthy of being treated as equals. And in doing so, humanity had given the entire galaxy a lesson it would never forget.